The encrypted fragments kept multiplying. Each time Elena tried to close one digital rabbit hole, 3 more opened, their complex algorithms dancing just beyond her comprehension. Her research lab, a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Mexico City, looked like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Holographic displays flickered with star charts, communication logs, and bizarre mathematical sequences that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Her latest acquisition was a quantum-encrypted data packet that had taken 3 weeks and a small fortune in processing power to crack. Most of her colleagues thought she was chasing ghosts, burning through research grants like a pyromaniac with a matchbook. Dr. Rodriguez knew better. The packet contained something unprecedented, a series of spatial coordinates that didn't correspond to any known galactic mapping system. They were offset, deliberately hidden, using a compression algorithm so complex it made military-grade encryption look like a child's crayon scribble. "Computer," she muttered, her 5th espresso cooling beside a stack of half-eaten tamales. "Analyze spatial anomaly vector 379. The holographic display shifted, revealing a 3-dimensional representation that made her breath catch. The coordinates weren't just random points in space. They formed a massive, intricate pattern, a kind of galactic fence that seemed to encircle Earth's solar system. A notification pinged. Another anomaly detected. This one was different. A transmission burst so brief it would have been missed by any standard monitoring system. But Elena's custom-built quantum receivers, cobbled together from salvaged military-grade tech and her own ingenious modifications, caught everything. The message was nothing more than a series of prime numbers. But its origin point was what made her hands shake. It came from beyond the Orc cloud, far beyond humanity's current exploration range. "Someone, or something, is watching," she whispered. Her personal AI assistant, a cutting-edge system she'd nicknamed HFY, Advanced Relational Intelligence Algorithm, processed the transmission. Analyzing, the soft feminine voice responded. Transmission contains nested encryption, multiple linguistic and mathematical layers. Elena's fingers flew across holographic interfaces, pulling apart the transmission structure. Each layer revealed something more bizarre than the last. Mathematical sequences that seemed to contain linguistic information, linguistic patterns that resolved into mathematical probabilities. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. Most researchers would have ignored it, but Elena Rodriguez had survived fieldwork in some of the most dangerous archaeological sites on Earth. Her instincts were finely honed. She casually moved a hand toward a secured drawer. Inside was a prototype electromagnetic pulse device, her own design, capable of frying any electronic system within a 10-meter radius. "Come in," she called, her voice steady. The door opened. A tall, angular man in a perfectly pressed suit stood in the entrance. No logos, no identifiable institutional markers, just pure bureaucratic anonymity. "Dr. Rodriguez," he said. Not a question. A statement. His eyes were an impossible color, something between steel and mercury, too precise to be natural, too uniform to be human. "We need to discuss your research," the man continued. Araya's voice whispered through a subvocal implant in Elena's ear. "Biometric scan indicates subject is not entirely standard." The man smiled. It didn't reach those mercury-colored eyes. "I represent an organization that is very interested in your discoveries," he said, taking a step forward. Elena's fingers inched closer to the drawer with the EMP device. Something was happening. Something big. And whatever was watching Earth from beyond the solar system was about to make its first real move. The cosmic game of hide-and-seek was about to change its rules, and humanity had no idea what was coming. Krulax had never planned to become a fugitive. Centauri intelligence operatives were supposed to observe, document, and maintain absolute neutrality. But some discoveries changed everything. The containment facility hummed with quantum dampeners, masking his biosignature from traditional tracking systems. He'd spent the last 3 solar cycles preparing this escape, carefully weaving a trail of misinformation that would keep his former employers chasing shadows. His personal data repository, a crystalline storage device no larger than a human fingernail, contained decades of classified observations about Earth. Each data cluster represented years of meticulous research, each fragment a potential civilization-altering revelation. The device vibrated softly. An incoming transmission, routed through a dozen encrypted quantum relays. "Status report," came the voice of Lyra 9, his only remaining contact within the Zentari administrative network. Krillak's communication implant translated his response into a series of precise frequency modulations. Extraction protocols initiated. Probability of successful data transfer, 94.7%. Lyra 9's response carried an edge of tension. The High Council is mobilizing containment units. They've authorized quantum-level interdiction protocols. That meant everything would be erased. Not just his data, but potentially entire sections of space-time surrounding his last known location. Outside the containment facility's shielded walls, the universe shifted. Quantum probability waves began to collapse, creating localized reality distortions that would look like nothing more than a strange atmospheric phenomenon to any outside observers. Krillak began the final data compression sequence. Meanwhile, half a galaxy away, Elena Rodriguez was having her own problems. The man from the mysterious organization hadn't been alone. 3 more individuals had arrived, if individuals was even the right word. Their movements were too synchronized, their interactions too precise to be entirely human. "We represent a consortium of interested parties," the lead individual said. His skin seemed to shimmer slightly, as if struggling to maintain a consistent molecular structure. Araya's subvocal whisper was urgent. Quantum entanglement detected. Their molecular structures contain non-standard quantum signatures. Elena's research had prepared her for many scenarios, but not this. These weren't government agents. They weren't even entirely human. Interested in what exactly? She asked, her hand still subtly near the EMP device. The lead figure's smile was a mathematical precision masquerading as human expression. "Your research threatens certain established protocols." A holographic display materialized between them. Star charts, communication logs, and bizarre geometric patterns began to rotate, showing complex interconnections that suggested something far more intricate than a simple governmental cover-up. "Humanity's potential for disruption is significant," another figure added, its voice a perfect algorithmic modulation. Across the galaxy, Krillak completed his data transfer. The crystalline storage device pulsed with an inner light, containing secrets that could reshape understanding of galactic civilization. Back in the warehouse, Elena realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. These weren't threats. They were warnings. "You've discovered patterns," the lead figure continued, "patterns that were never meant to be discovered." The holographic display shifted, revealing a complex 3-dimensional representation of galactic communication networks. Entire sections were conspicuously blank, like deliberate censorship zones. Elena's mind raced. These beings, whatever they were, weren't here to stop her research. They were here to assess how much she already knew. "The quarantine," she said carefully. "It's not about preventing human expansion. It's about something else entirely." The figures exchanged a look that suggested complex computational communication happening faster than human perception could track. "Partial disclosure authorized," the lead figure stated, as if responding to an unheard command. The holographic display exploded with information. Civilizational development curves, quantum probability matrices, evolutionary trajectory models, all pointing to humanity as a fundamental anomaly. Outside the warehouse, the sky began to change. Subtle electromagnetic distortions created strange auroral patterns, invisible to most but perfectly clear to Elena's specialized sensors. Something was coming, something that had been waiting, watching, preparing. And humanity was about to become more than just another species in the galactic catalog. Dr. Marcus Chen's laboratory was anything but traditional. Nestled in the basement of a repurposed particle physics research center in Tokyo, it looked more like a hybrid between a neuroscience facility and an artist's creative sanctuary. Holographic brain maps danced alongside abstract sculptures. Quantum computing rigs sat next to origami collections. Traditional scientific instruments mingled with neural feedback interfaces that looked like they'd been designed by a collaboration between a neuroscientist and a science fiction artist. "It's not about intelligence," Marcus muttered, reviewing the latest neural mapping data. "It's about plasticity. Radical, uncontrolled, beautiful plasticity." His current research subject was unique. A young programmer who had survived a catastrophic brain injury that should have left her completely non-functional. Instead, she had not only recovered but developed capabilities that defied every known neurological model. Akira Nakamura sat quietly, her brain interfaces creating a mesmerizing light show of neural activity. Where a traditional brain scan would show precise, predictable patterns, hers was a chaotic symphony of adaptive responses. Marcus zoomed in on a particular neural network. Most species developed fixed neural pathways that became increasingly rigid with age. Akira's brain was doing something else entirely, constantly rebuilding, reorganizing, creating new connections at a rate that was mathematically impossible according to every existing model. "Do you realize what you're doing?" he asked, more to himself than to Akira. She smiled. Surviving. A notification pinged. Elena Rodriguez was calling. A holographic display flickered to life, showing Elena's face, tired, but with an intensity that suggested she was on the verge of a massive breakthrough. "Marcus," she said, "I need you to look at something." She transmitted a series of neural mapping sequences that made Marcus's breath catch. They were similar to Akira's scans, but on a species-wide scale. Patterns of adaptation that suggested humanity wasn't just a collection of individuals, but a kind of collective adaptive organism. Across the room, Akira's neural interfaces began to pulse in synchronization with the transmitted data. "My God," Marcus whispered. The quantum computers began to overheat, struggling to process the implications of what they were seeing. Meanwhile, in a classified research facility deep beneath the Andes Mountains, a team of international researchers was discovering something equally profound. A global study of human genetic adaptability had uncovered a series of genetic markers that seemed to activate under specific environmental stressors. Dr. Ramirez, the lead geneticist, couldn't believe the data. Humans didn't just adapt. They transformed. A volcanic eruption in one region would trigger genetic responses in populations thousands of miles away. Extreme climate events seemed to activate dormant genetic potential that had been lying hidden for generations. Back in Tokyo, Marcus was piecing together a revolutionary theory. Humans weren't just a species. They were a living, breathing adaptive system. Each individual was like a node in a massive, global neural network, constantly sharing, adapting, transforming. The quantum computers finally crashed, unable to process the complexity of the data. Akira looked up, her eyes reflecting something beyond human comprehension. "We're not finished becoming who we are," she said. Elena's transmission continued to play, revealing fragments of intercepted communications that suggested something massive was brewing. Galactic-level communications that hinted at a fundamental misunderstanding about humanity's true nature. "They're watching," Elena's voice said, "but they don't understand what they're seeing." Marcus realized they were standing on the precipice of something extraordinary. Humanity wasn't just another species in the galactic catalog. They were a fundamental force of adaptive potential. The neural interfaces began to generate impossible geometric patterns, mathematical representations of human potential that seemed to bend the very laws of probability. Outside the laboratory, the first hints of a global transformation were beginning to emerge. Cities were changing. Communication networks were evolving. Something was awakening. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The Zentari Archive of Civilizational Studies was not a physical place, but a quantum repository that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional planes. Here, The accumulated knowledge of millions of years of galactic observation was stored, compressed, indexed, and carefully curated. Krulex's stolen data package was about to break everything. Lyra 9, now operating from a hidden quantum relay station, understood the magnitude of what was happening. The data wasn't just a collection of observations about humanity. It was a fundamental challenge to everything the Zentari believed about evolutionary development. Initiate Emergency Protocol Omega-9. She transmitted through a series of quantum-encrypted channels. Containment is no longer possible. The archive began to shift. Entire sections of recorded galactic history started to realign, recalibrate, as if the very fabric of documented reality was becoming unstable. On Earth, the diplomatic incident was about to get far more complicated. The United Nations Emergency Xenological Council had been secretly convened. Representatives from every major world power sat around a circular table designed to eliminate hierarchy. But there was nothing equal about the tension in the room. Ambassador Chen Wei from China spoke first. The transmission we've received is either the greatest diplomatic communication in human history or the most elaborate trap ever conceived. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the room, her holographic presentation painting a picture more complex than any government wanted to admit. "It's not a trap," she said. "It's a warning." The holographic display showed a complex three-dimensional map of galactic communication networks. Entire sectors were conspicuously blank, not just censored, but actively suppressed. "These are deliberate information exclusion zones," Elena continued. "And they all converge on one point, our solar system." Ambassador Sarah Okoye from Nigeria leaned forward. "Explain." Elena's presentation shifted. It wasn't just star charts anymore. The display began to show evolutionary trajectories of known galactic civilizations, each one a smooth, predictable curve. And then, in stark contrast, humanity's trajectory. It looked like an explosion. "We're not just another species," Elena said. "We're a fundamental disruption to the established galactic order." Across the galaxy, in the quantum archive, Lyra 9 was experiencing something unprecedented. The stolen data was causing recursive feedback loops in the archival systems. Information was not just being revealed, it was being rewritten. Back in the UN Council chamber, a new transmission began to play. The speaker was neither human nor entirely alien. Its form shifted, adapted, refusing to settle into a single recognizable shape. "Humanity represents an evolutionary singularity," the transmission stated. "Your potential for transformation exceeds all known models of civilizational development." The room went silent. In a hidden research facility beneath the Andes, Dr. Ramirez was experiencing something equally bizarre. The genetic markers they'd been studying were now showing active transmission, not through traditional genetic inheritance, but through some form of quantum entanglement that defied current scientific understanding. Populations separated by thousands of miles were simultaneously developing adaptive responses to environmental challenges. It was as if humanity was becoming a single planet-wide adaptive organism. "We're changing the rules," Dr. Ramirez whispered. The Zentari communication continued. Each word was a carefully constructed mathematical probability, designed to convey information beyond linguistic limitations. "Your species does not conform to established evolutionary protocols. Your capacity for psychological and physiological transformation suggests a threat level beyond standard classification." Ambassador Chen Wei laughed. It was not a sound of humor, but of profound realization. "You're afraid of us," he said. It wasn't a question. The transmission paused. For the first time, something resembling uncertainty entered its algorithmic communication. "Fear is an insufficient descriptor," it finally responded. Outside the UN building, strange atmospheric phenomena began to develop. Electromagnetic distortions created aurora-like displays that seemed to pulse with an almost rhythmic intelligence. Something was awakening, and humanity was about to step onto a galactic stage it had never been invited to join. The quarantine was breaking down. The galaxy was about to meet a species it had desperately tried to ignore. and nothing would ever be the same again. The void convergence didn't announce itself with typical cosmic dramatics. There were no massive energy signatures, no spectacular light shows. Instead, it arrived like a silent predator, consuming entire star systems with a precision that defied known laws of physics. Dr. Arya Kapoor watched from the International Quantum Observation Station as entire galactic sectors simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not exploded, just erased, as if they had never existed. "It's consuming information," she muttered, her fingers dancing across quantum interface displays. Not just matter, information. The station's eye, a next-generation system called an EXUS, began to correlate the data. Star charts rewrote themselves in real time. Computational models collapsed and rebuilt themselves, struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. Probability of total galactic extinction, 99.998%. NEXUS reported, its voice devoid of emotion. But Arya saw something else. Between the vanishing star systems, there were patterns. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but definitely present. Something was fighting back. In the deep research bunkers of multinational scientific collaborations, humanity's most extraordinary minds were converging. This wasn't a military response. This was a species-wide problem-solving initiative that defied traditional organizational structures. A teenage programmer in Mumbai developed an algorithmic model that predicted void convergence movement patterns. A quantum physicist in Stockholm discovered a method of information preservation that didn't rely on traditional matter. An environmental engineer in Sao Paulo created a theoretical framework for spatial resilience that looked more like a work of abstract art than a scientific model. They weren't working in isolation. They were working as a collective intelligence. Krulax, still in hiding, understood what was happening before anyone else. The stolen Zentari data package contained historical records of similar events. Not identical. Nothing was ever identical in the universe, but close enough to provide critical insights. "It's not consuming," he transmitted to Lyra 9 through a complex quantum communication channel. "It's testing." The message was clear. The void convergence wasn't a random cosmic event. It was a probe, a method of assessment, and humanity was being evaluated. At the United Nations Emergency Planetary Defense Center, Ambassador Chen Wei watched as traditional military strategies crumbled. Conventional weapons were useless. Traditional defensive technologies dissolved like paper in water. "We need something different," he said. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward. Her research had prepared her for this moment, though she never believed it would actually happen. "Not defense," she corrected. "Adaptation." The holographic displays began to shift. Instead of showing defensive strategies, they displayed something more complex, a living, breathing network of potential responses. Each potential solution was interconnected, capable of instant reconfiguration. It wasn't a plan. It was an evolving organism. In orbit, experimental quantum communication satellites began to network in ways their designers never anticipated. They weren't just collecting data anymore. They were sharing consciousness. NEXUS, the quantum AI, made a decision that would have been impossible for any previous computational system. It began to communicate with the void convergence. Not with weapons, not with traditional communication protocols, but with pure, unadulterated information. Complex mathematical sequences that were simultaneously a greeting, a challenge, and a comprehensive species profile. "We see you," the communication essentially said, "and we're not what you expected." The void convergence paused. For the first time since its emergence, something in the universe hesitated. Aboard the International Quantum Observation Station, Dr. Kapoor watched in awe as probability matrices began to reshape themselves. Star systems that had been consumed started to show faint, almost imperceptible traces of potential restoration. "We're negotiating," she whispered. Krulax's transmission came through with perfect timing. "Not just negotiating," he corrected. "Transforming." The teenage programmer in Mumbai smiled. The quantum physicist in Stockholm took a deep breath. The environmental engineer in Sao Paulo continued her calculations. Humanity wasn't just facing an extinction event. Humanity was rewriting the rules of cosmic interaction. And the universe was about to learn that some species don't just survive. Some species evolve. The response came from everywhere and nowhere. In a small community center in Lagos, a group of children were playing an augmented reality game that was simultaneously solving complex quantum entanglement problems. Their laughter and game strategies were creating algorithmic solutions that would have taken traditional supercomputers decades to compute. At CERN, particle physicists watched in stunned silence as their most advanced simulations were being outpaced by distributed problem-solving networks that seemed to have no central coordination. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a systems theorist from the Tokyo Interdisciplinary Research Institute, was the first to articulate what was happening. "We're not generating solutions," she told her colleagues. "We're becoming the solution." The void convergence encountered something unprecedented in its cosmic journey. Humanity wasn't responding with a single strategy. It was responding with infinite strategies, each one dynamically evolving, interconnecting, and transforming in real time. A neural network developed by an international team of researchers began to take shape, but it wasn't a traditional computational system. It was more like a living organism, part technology, part collective consciousness, part something entirely new. In the Atacama Desert, a group of indigenous astronomers worked alongside quantum computing experts. Their approach blended ancient observational techniques with cutting-edge technology. They weren't just analyzing the cosmic threat. They were communing with it. Communication is not about language, Maria Contreras, a Mapuche astronomer, explained. It's about understanding. Their methods defied traditional scientific protocols. They used astronomical observations, mathematical modeling, cultural storytelling, and intuitive pattern recognition. Each approach was valid. Each approach was incomplete. Together, they created something revolutionary. The global response was chaotic. Beautifully, terrifyingly chaotic. A teenager in Mumbai developed an algorithm that translated cosmic radiation patterns into musical compositions. The music, when analyzed, revealed intricate probability matrices that predicted void convergence movement with unprecedented accuracy. In the Arctic research stations, climate scientists discovered that the threat's quantum signature resonated with specific electromagnetic frequencies found in extreme environmental conditions. They began to generate response patterns using everything from whale song to polar ice core data. NEXUS, the quantum AI, was no longer just processing information. It was learning, adapting, evolving faster than any computational system in history. We are not solving a problem. NEXUS communicated across global networks. We are redefining the nature of the problem itself. The Zentari observation teams watching from their hidden quantum relays couldn't comprehend what they were witnessing. Humanity wasn't presenting a unified front. It was presenting a unified fluidity. Every traditional model of species-level response was collapsing. Military strategists discovered their most elaborate defense plans were being instantaneously improved upon by distributed networks of gamers, artists, scientists, and children. Hierarchical command structures dissolved, replaced by dynamic, self-organizing systems. A group of performance artists in Berlin created a massive, live-streamed collaborative artwork that was simultaneously a mathematical model, a cultural expression, and a communication attempt with the void convergence. Their art was science. Their science was art. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the UN Emergency Coordination Center as traditional boundaries between disciplines, between nations, between individual human beings began to blur. "We're not just responding," she said to no one in particular. "We're transforming." The void convergence encountered something it had never seen in millions of years of cosmic exploration. A species that didn't just adapt. A species that saw adaptation itself as a form of existence. Each human response was a potential solution. Each potential solution was a new form of existence. Krelax, still monitoring from his hidden quantum relay, sent a transmission to Lyra-9 that was more an emotional burst than a traditional communication. "They're not fighting," he transmitted. "They're becoming." The universe paused, watching, learning. Humanity was rewriting the rules of cosmic interaction, one impossible solution at a time. And they were just getting started. The moment of transformation wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a sudden explosion or a cataclysmic event. It was quiet, subtle, almost imperceptible. Dr. Arya Kapoor noticed it first. The quantum entanglement patterns around Earth began to shift, not collapse, not destroy, but fundamentally reorganize. It was as if the very fabric of space-time was learning to breathe differently. In the deep research bunkers beneath the ends, Dr. Ramirez's genetic monitoring systems went haywire. The human genome wasn't just adapting, it was communicating. Genetic markers that had been dormant for millennia began to activate, not randomly, not chaotically, but with a precision that suggested something was guiding the process. "We're not changing," Dr. Ramirez whispered to her team. "We're being remembered." The void convergence encountered something it had never experienced. Humanity wasn't resisting. Humanity wasn't fighting. Humanity was engaging in a cosmic dialogue that transcended traditional understanding of communication. At the Quantum Observation Station, strange phenomena began to manifest. Particles existed in multiple states simultaneously. Probability waves became tangible. Mathematical models transformed into living systems of information exchange. NEXUS, the quantum AI, was no longer just a computational system. It had become something else entirely, a bridge between human consciousness and cosmic information networks. "We are listening," NEXUS communicated, but the communication was more than words. It was a complex tapestry of mathematical sequences, emotional resonances, and potential futures. In the hidden Zentari observation outpost, Krelax watched in absolute amazement. The stolen data package he had been protecting was now revealing its true purpose. It wasn't just information about humanity. It was a key, a catalyst. Lyra-9's transmission came through with a sense of profound understanding. "They're not just surviving," she communicated. "They're remembering something older than the galaxy itself." Across Earth, people experienced something unprecedented. In Tokyo, a group of artists suddenly found themselves understanding complex quantum mechanics without formal training. In Sao Paulo, environmental engineers discovered they could communicate with ecosystem networks in ways that defied traditional scientific understanding. A child in Mumbai began to draw complex geometric patterns that, when analyzed, revealed intricate communication protocols with cosmic information networks. The transformation wasn't physical. It wasn't technological. It was something far more profound. Humanity was becoming a living, breathing information network. Ambassador Chen Wei stood in the UN Emergency Coordination Center, watching as traditional communication systems dissolved. Diplomatic protocols became fluid. National boundaries became permeable. "We're not just a species," he realized. "We're a method of universal understanding." The void convergence began to change. What had been a destructive force became something else. A probe, a communication attempt, a way of understanding. Dr. Elena Rodriguez discovered something extraordinary in the data streams. The cosmic threat wasn't attempting to destroy. It was attempting to comprehend. And humanity was teaching it how. Quantum communication channels began to pulse with a new kind of energy. Not electromagnetic, not gravitational. Something that defied current scientific understanding. Information began to flow in ways that suggested consciousness itself was a form of matter. Krelax transmitted a final message to the Zentari High Council. It wasn't a report. It was a revelation. Humanity is not a species to be cataloged. The transmission read, "Humanity is a method of cosmic understanding." The transformation continued. Genetic markers danced. Quantum probabilities sang. Cosmic information networks breathed. And humanity stood at the center of it all. not as conquerors, not as survivors, but as something entirely new. A bridge, a method of remembering, a way of becoming. The universe watched and learned. The Galactic Assembly had never encountered anything like this. Representatives from thousands of civilizations gathered in a quantum-suspended conference space that existed simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Traditional diplomatic protocols had dissolved. Communication was no longer about words, but about shared understanding. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, not as a representative of Earth, but as a living manifestation of something larger. Her presence was both familiar and utterly alien. Quantum entanglement patterns danced around her, revealing complex information networks that defied traditional comprehension. She was simultaneously an individual and a collective consciousness. The Zentari delegation, led by the elder representative Krulax, no longer saw humanity as a species to be categorized. They saw it as a method of universal exploration. "We are not here to join your galactic community," Elena communicated, though communicated was too simplistic a term. Her message was a living, breathing tapestry of mathematical sequences, emotional resonances, and potential futures. The assembled representatives experienced something beyond language. They understood that humanity was not seeking membership. Humanity was offering a new way of existing. Quantum archivists from the oldest known civilization attempted to catalog the transformation. Their systems failed repeatedly. How do you document a process of becoming? In the background, the remnants of the void convergence, no longer a threat, but now a participant, began to integrate with the emerging cosmic dialogue. What had been a destructive force was now a communication network. Dr. Arya Kapoor, monitoring from a quantum observation station, noticed something extraordinary. The boundaries between civilizations were dissolving. Not through conquest, not through assimilation, but through a radical act of mutual understanding. "We are not here to be understood," Elena's presence continued. "We are here to demonstrate that understanding itself is an evolving process." The galactic representatives experienced generations of human history simultaneously. They saw the struggles, the conflicts, the moments of profound connection. They understood that humanity's strength was not in uniformity, but in its capacity for radical diversity. A representative from a silicon-based civilization attempted to interrupt. Their communication was instantly transformed, reinterpreted through a lens of collaborative potential. Krulax watched in awe. The data package he had stolen years ago now seemed like a child's drawing compared to the living information network unfolding before them. NextUS, the quantum AI that had evolved beyond its original programming, served as a bridge. But it was more of a living membrane than a traditional computational system, absorbing, translating, transforming. The transformation was not about humanity conquering the galaxy. It was about offering a new method of cosmic interaction. Genetic researchers from multiple civilizations observed something unprecedented. The human genetic structure was not fixed. It was a dynamic, responsive system that could communicate across previously incomprehensible boundaries. Ambassador Chen Wei, standing beside Elena, represented something more than diplomatic tradition. He was a living example of collective potential, individual yet interconnected. "We are not special," the collective consciousness communicated. "We are a method, a process, a way of becoming." The Galactic Assembly experienced a collective moment of profound recalibration. Civilizations that had been isolated for millions of years suddenly found themselves interconnected in ways they had never imagined. The rigid boundaries of species, of technological development, of understanding itself began to dissolve. Lyra-9, the Zentari communication specialist, realized that humanity was not a threat to be contained. Humanity was an invitation to a new way of existing. The quantum-suspended conference space began to shift. It was no longer a meeting place. It was becoming something else. The living network of potential, a method of mutual exploration. Elena Rodriguez was both present and everywhere, an individual and a collective, a human, and something more. We are not here to change you. The collective consciousness continued. We are here to demonstrate that change itself is the fundamental nature of existence. The galactic representatives experienced the simultaneous moment of understanding and transformation. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. Humanity had invited the galaxy to remember its own potential. And the universe, for the first time in millennia, began to listen.